After a little bit more practice and exploration, I had chosen my team. Beowulf on point, followed by Fukua, and finally Painwheel. After trying the other characters a fair amount and doing a little bit of research into team compositions, I chose these three to accomplish a strategy I thought would be fun to practice. The basic idea was this: run Beowulf first, going for the same thing as always. Then if I needed to, I could swap to Fukua to stall and build meter. Then I would be able to use a blockbuster sequel to call in Painwheel's Hatred install, a super that powers up her moveset and allows for huge combo potential. Something to note here that I didn't realize at the time, and wouldn't realize until many days later, was that my team order wasn't actually set up correctly. I should have put Painwheel second to make sure she comes out next when I input the follow-up super. That being said, for now, I wasn't really ready yet to start executing on that plan anyway, so it didn't really matter in these matches. For this video, I'm not going to talk about Beowulf as much, since despite some struggles, such as adjusting to a tighter timing window with Fukua's assist, I was feeling pretty comfortable overall and I was mostly focused on the following. Basic combos and commands for Fukua and Painwheel. As I said before, I didn't feel anywhere near ready yet to actually start using Painwheel's Hatred install super before I felt really accustomed to her basic attack patterns as well as her unique mechanics, such as flight cancelling. More on that later in the struggles section. Likewise, many of Fukua's strongest options and conversions take advantage of her Shadow Clone mechanic, which allows you to release a delayable low, command grab, or an overhead attack. With both characters, my goal was to just familiarize myself with their basic commands and slowly work my way to the more optimized combo patterns. Punishing with push block. A few videos ago, I talked about how I was starting to learn this mechanic as a way to escape block pressure by pushing my opponent away. Now, my goal wasn't just to escape pressure, but to turn it around into my own offense instead. This included experimenting with a mechanic that was introduced way back in the tutorials, the push block guard cancel. In a nutshell, this just means that if you use a push block against an attack that normally keeps your character stuck in block stun, for example, a heavy attack, you can use the animation of a push block to cancel the duration of the stun and act sooner than if you had been guarding normally. This is indicated by a green flash. Something to note here is that I would jump the gun a lot and push block too soon, often resulting in a vulnerable backdash instead. This is because both commands are intentionally the same input, 2 punch buttons while holding back. Using outtakes to deplete red life. Using the universal outtake attack allows you to force the opponent to swap to the next member of their team. This is important because when you do so, you remove all of the red life that character has, preventing them from healing it back while not on screen. I was looking for this every opportunity that I got, especially since Beowulf has a unique and hilarious outtake from his grab stance, where he puts your opponent's character in a trash can. As always, here's just a handful of key takeaways that represented some immediate problems I wanted to solve. Finding an effective Painwheel assist. Just as before, when I was trying double alongside Sarabella and Beowulf, I had to figure out what I wanted Painwheel's assist to accomplish, since its purpose was a lot less clear than Fukua's. My first instinct was to look for something that would help me close the gap from a distance, like Double's Hornet Bomber, so I opted for her light Pinion Dash attack, which sends her forward as sort of a slow-moving projectile. This didn't really work as well as I'd expected. Eventually, I changed it to a fast, multi-hitting medium punch. While this meant I was giving up any range, it also meant that when I did succeed in approaching, I had a strong tool to keep my opponents from running away again. Dealing with Parasoul's powerful normals and zoning strategy. It's safe to say my opponent had figured out a simple but extremely effective strategy to keep me in check from the mid to long range. This simple ground string was the bane of my existence, and forced me to realize that I had a lot more work to do when it came to using defensive tools, such as push block, effectively. I had a bad habit of autopilot push blocking at the end of a string, which usually ended up only helping my opponent. Execution with Painwheel. While I often mention difficulty in execution with new characters, especially with mechanics I'm not as familiar with, such as Sarabella's charge motions, I still feel it's worth mentioning Painwheel. To compensate for how frightening her damage output can be, especially with Hatred install, she has a very short range and sort of awkward mobility with her slow forward dash and flight mechanic. On top of that, maintaining offensive pressure means constantly using her flight ability to cancel her normal attacks. and then transitioning that flight immediately into an aerial attack. I spent a lot of time grinding out her easier combo for beginners bread and butter to get a feel for this, but it was still something I screwed up constantly. This point in the journey felt to me like a significant milestone, and a lot more like, okay, now I'm playing Skullgirls. This was the point where I started to see the potential for my growth and really get a taste of the kind of fun this game had to offer, much more so than before, despite still enjoying the game even then. I was excited to imagine reaching a point where I could focus less on moment-to-moment execution and more on creating plans as the game state adapted and changed every second. That being said, naturally I've really only been playing against one opponent this whole time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but meant I had a lot of work to do when it came to learning other matchups and simply dealing with strategies my opponent hadn't started using with his characters yet. It was once again time to level up my practice a bit, and day 19 is when I officially began the MatchNotes project. In the next episode, we're going to do something a little different and talk about solo training and do a little bit of reflecting. Until then, thanks for watching.